February 1943, the North Atlantic Ocean crashed against the steel hull of the transport ship as it carried hundreds of German female prisoners toward an unknown destination. Wehrmacht Nurse Corporal Hannah Miller sat in the dark cargo hold. She was among 347 captured women, nurses, signals operators, and auxiliary corps members. Their hands bound, their uniforms still caked with sand from the North African desert, where Allied forces had defeated them weeks earlier. Hannah was 24 years old and had never expected to become a prisoner. The air smelled of salt water, diesel fuel, and unwashed bodies. She had expected to die serving Germany. She had never once imagined surrender or capture. Back home in Germany, the war consumed everything. By early 1943, the Nazi regime had mobilized the entire nation for total war. Every factory produced weapons. Every farm sent its food to soldiers at the front. German civilians received ration cards providing only 2,400 calories each day, barely enough to survive. Meat appeared once or twice weekly if families were lucky. Real coffee had vanished, replaced by roasted grain that tasted like burnt dirt. Butter was a distant memory. Women stood in line for hours hoping to buy bread mixed with sawdust to make it stretch further. The Nazi propaganda filled every radio broadcast and newspaper with promises of inevitable victory. Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels spoke constantly about the weakness of democracy, the cruelty of Britain, and the cowardice of America. German women in the military received the same warnings as the men during their training. Capture meant torture. The Americans would beat you, humiliate you, and worse. Better to die serving Germany than fall into enemy hands where unspeakable horrors awaited every female prisoner taken by the ruthless Allied forces. Hannah had believed these warnings completely. Every German servicewoman believed them. They had no reason to doubt. The Reich controlled all information. No contradicting voices existed. No alternative perspectives filtered through to challenge anything. So when the transport ship finally docked and guards marched the prisoners off onto American soil, Hannah braced herself for the worst. She expected violence, humiliation, and starvation in some frozen and forgotten labor camp. Hey dear, you have to follow us now so you get more of our World War II stories we document. Help us hit our target of 10K followers before the end of this month. Also, don't forget to like and share to your friends too. Now let's continue our video. Instead, military trucks with working heaters drove them north to a place called Camp Concordia in Kansas. The trucks had cushioned seats. The female guards did not strike anyone. They did not even raise their voices during the journey. Camp Concordia sat surrounded by farmland and open plains, far from any major city. High fences topped with barbed wire enclosed several long wooden barracks painted white. Guard towers stood at each corner with soldiers watching carefully. As the prisoners filed through the gates, Hannah noticed something strange. The buildings looked solid and new. Smoke rose from chimneys, meaning the barracks had heat. Through windows, she glimpsed bunk beds with actual mattresses inside. The American officer in charge, a captain with a calm expression, addressed them through a German-speaking interpreter. Her words shocked every woman standing in formation in the cold February air. Nobody had expected what came next. "You will be treated according to the Geneva Convention," the interpreter translated. "You will receive adequate food, shelter, and medical care. You will not be harmed if you follow the rules. Welcome to the United States." Hannah exchanged confused glances with Clara, a signals operator from Munich captured alongside her. What kind of prison camp welcomed its prisoners? Guards assigned them to barracks. Each building held 60 women in organized rows. Inside, Hannah found rows of bunk beds with real mattresses stuffed with straw. Wool blankets lay folded on each bed, 2 per person. The barracks had a wood stove in the center, already burning and keeping the space warm. Windows had actual glass, not boards or bars. The wooden floors looked clean and swept. Then came dinner. Guards led groups to a large mess hall. The kitchen staff, a mix of American soldiers and German prisoners, served food on trays. Hannah stared at her tray in disbelief. Beef stew with actual chunks of meat among potatoes and carrots. 2 thick slices of white bread, real butter, not margarine, and a cup of coffee that smelled genuinely real and fresh. Clara sat beside her, holding her spoon but not eating, just staring at the food. "This is a trick," she whispered. "They fatten us up before something terrible happens." But Hannah was too hungry to care. She ate every bite. The stew tasted rich and filling. The bread was soft and fresh. The butter melted on her tongue like a forgotten dream. She could not remember the last time she had eaten so well, not since long before the war began. Around her, 300 other German women ate in silence, their faces showing confusion and disbelief. Some women cried quietly as they chewed, overwhelmed by unexpected kindness. Others ate mechanically, unable to process what was happening to them. That night, lying on her bunk under 2 warm blankets, listening to the wood stove crackle, Hannah could not sleep. Her mind spun with questions. Why did the Americans treat captured enemy women so generously and with such dignity? Where did all this food come from during wartime? How could they afford such generosity? Everything she had been taught about weak and dying democracies contradicted what she had experienced in her first 12 hours as a prisoner. On the third morning, a moment arrived that would define Hannah's entire captivity. An American female guard captain walked into the recreation yard, carrying an armload of ice skates and wooden hockey sticks. 2 guards dragged a box of pucks. The captain set everything down near the frozen pond at the edge of the campgrounds and looked at the gathered German women. "Any of you know how to skate?" she asked calmly through the interpreter, her expression warm and genuinely friendly. The women stared in stunned silence. Hannah thought she must have misheard. Ice skating hockey. In a prison camp during a war. Several women raised their hands slowly, unsure if this was a test or some kind of deliberate trap. Hannah raised her hand too. She had grown up near a lake in Bavaria and skated every winter as a girl. The captain smiled. "Good. We play hockey here on Thursday afternoons. Guards and prisoners together. It helps pass the time." Clara grabbed Hannah's arm and whispered urgently, "This cannot be real." What prison camp plays games with prisoners? But it was real. That Thursday, Hannah laced up borrowed skates and stepped onto the ice for the first time in 5 years. The frozen pond stretched about 30 meters across, surrounded by snow-covered trees. American female guards skated out too, dividing into teams for what would quickly become one of the most anticipated weekly events inside the camp. A young corporal with red hair passed the puck to Hannah. "You're on my team," she said through gestures and broken German. "Let's beat these guys." For 2 hours they played, German servicewomen and United States Army guards together. They chased a rubber puck across the ice, shouting and laughing when someone fell, cheering when someone scored. A German signals officer sped past an American sergeant and slapped the puck into the makeshift goal. The sergeant laughed and applauded. Hannah scored once herself, a sloppy shot that somehow slipped past the goalie. Her teammates, both German and American, celebrated together loudly. When the game ended, Hannah sat on a bench removing her skates, breathing hard and smiling. Her cheeks were flushed from exercise and cold air. She felt more alive than she had in months, more human. The American corporal sat beside her unlacing skates. "Good game," she said in English, giving a thumbs up. Hannah nodded slowly. The hockey games became a regular event every Thursday, but they were just one of countless shocks that continued to pile up week after week. The camp held 645 German women by March, and the food kept arriving in impossible quantities. Hannah watched supply trucks roll through the gates every Monday and Friday, loaded with sacks of flour, crates of canned vegetables, boxes of fresh potatoes, and sides of beef. She volunteered in the kitchen to see the numbers herself. Each prisoner received approximately 3,200 calories per day. German soldiers fighting at the front received about 3,000. Civilians back home received only 2,400 on paper, and in reality, rations often ran short, and people made do with far less. Breakfast included porridge with real milk, scrambled eggs twice a week, toast with butter or jam, and coffee or tea. Lunch brought soup with bread and sometimes cheese. Dinner featured meat 4 times every week without exception. Beef or pork or chicken accompanied by potatoes or rice, vegetables from cans, and occasionally actual dessert, cake or pudding or canned fruit. Hannah gained weight quickly. Her sunken cheeks filled out. Her energy slowly returned to her body. A Red Cross inspection in June documented that German women prisoners at the camp had gained an average of 14 pounds within their first 6 months of captivity. 14 pounds. While Germany starved, its women fattened in American prison camps. The abundance extended beyond food. The camp library held 2,300 books in German, everything from novels to technical manuals. Educational courses began in April. A former university professor among the prisoners taught engineering and mathematics. A sewing and crafts workshop opened in one of the smaller buildings, and a German seamstress taught others her skills. Women made clothing repairs, handmade gifts and decorations for the barracks. The American guards encouraged every bit of it. The camp infirmary shocked Hannah most of all. She went in May with a bad chest cold. A United States military doctor examined her thoroughly, prescribed sulfur drugs, and cleared her infection in 4 days. The care was complete and compassionate. The infirmary had X-ray equipment, surgical tools, bandages, antiseptics, and a full stock of medications. The doctor treated German women prisoners exactly the same as she would treat American soldiers. Hannah began keeping a secret diary under her mattress. She documented everything: the food quantities, the kindness, the medical care, the hockey games, the books, the workshops. She wrote about her growing confusion and the questions that plagued her every single night lying in her warm bunk. If the United States could afford to feed prisoners 3,200 calories daily, how much did American women at home eat? If they had medicine to spare for enemies, how well equipped were their hospitals? How free were ordinary American women in daily life? The propaganda had taught her that democracies were weak and dying, but everything Hannah saw suggested the opposite. This was not weakness. This was strength so overwhelming that America could afford extraordinary generosity even in the middle of a world war. Christmas Eve 1943 arrived with heavy snow falling across the camp. Hannah had been a prisoner for 10 months. 10 months that had slowly, steadily dismantled everything she thought she knew about the world and about her enemies. 2 weeks earlier, the camp commander, a United States Army major with grey hair and a kind face, had announced that prisoners could celebrate Christmas properly. Decorations, entertainment, religious services, and a special feast with extra rations approved by the government. Clara approached Hannah that evening with tears in her eyes. "They celebrate the birth of Christ with us," she said quietly. "We who served the regime that bombed their cities. What kind of people are these?" Hannah had no answer. The women asked the guards for permission to cut pine trees from the forest beyond the fences. The guards agreed and provided saws and axes. 20 women marched into the woods under light guard and brought trees back to decorate the camp. They made ornaments from scraps, paper stars painted with watercolors and strings of popcorn from the kitchen. A former opera singer from Berlin organized a choir that practiced German Christmas carols every evening in the cold December air. The mess hall transformed from a plain military dining area into something magical and warm and full of hope. Christmas Eve arrived. The women gathered at 5 in the evening as darkness fell and snow piled against the frosted window panes. The choir performed first, 30 German women standing on a small stage, singing in 4-part harmony. Their voices rose pure and clear, filling the hall with beauty. Hannah thought of her mother and father in Bavaria. Were they still alive? Then came the feast. Kitchen workers brought out platters piled high with roasted turkey, baked ham glazed with something sweet, mountains of mashed potatoes with rich gravy, vegetables, fresh rolls with real butter, and then incredible dessert. Apple pie, pumpkin pie, chocolate cake, real chocolate. Not the grain substitute German women had choked down for years. Hannah stared at her plate. It held more food than her entire family would see in a week back home in Bavaria. Clara sat beside her, fork in hand, just staring. "How?" she whispered. "How can they have so much?" Around them, other women wept openly as they ate. A United States Army sergeant watched nearby with an expression of quiet, dignified satisfaction. Hannah caught her eye. The sergeant nodded slightly, a gesture of shared humanity across the divide of war. In that moment, something inside Hannah broke apart completely. She understood with sudden clarity that the propaganda had been entirely backwards. Germany was not fighting weak, dying democracies. It was fighting a civilization so strong, so wealthy, and so confident in its own power that it could afford to treat its female enemies with genuine, unlimited, and extraordinary human kindness. A nation that fed its women prisoners better than Germany fed its own soldiers had already won the war, even if the shooting continued for years. Democracy had not made America weak. It had made America so powerful it could play hockey with its enemies and still win.